Hi, and welcome to the second section of Chapter 29 on Wilsonian Progressivism at Home and Abroad from 1912 to 1916. This is the second part of it. We're going to be covering new directions in foreign policy to Wilson wins re-election. Quite a bit to do here, including the Mexican Civil War and the causes of the Great War, World War I, so we better get right into it. We got a lot to do. Woodrow Wilson, President Wilson, was an anti-imperialist. He's not like McKinley, is not like Roosevelt. He opposed aggressive foreign policy. He doesn't think you should just take over things because you want them or you fancy them. He persuaded Congress in 1914 to repeal the Panama Canal Tolls Act of 1912. The U.S. completing the Panama Canal was going to be done in 1914. It was going to charge a bunch of tolls on everyone. Didn't think that was right. I mean, obviously you should make some money, but I'm not sure all the details on that and all the minutiae of it. He also signed the Jones Act in 1916, which granted the Philippines territorial status within the U.S. empire and promised independence as soon as they could, a stable government could be established. It also establishes the government for Puerto Rico, which is kind of a big deal. When political turmoil broke out in Haiti in 1915, Wilson dispatched Marines to protect American lives and property. So he wasn't a pacifist. He wasn't even going to just back down, but if American interests were at heart, then the military would be used. He also in 1916 signed a treaty with Haiti that provided U.S. supervision of their finances, their police, tried to help them out a little bit, the island in the Caribbean. And then also in 1917, Wilson purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark. Just buy islands, I guess. It's pretty nice. You ever go there? It's beautiful. Go to Megan's Bay. It's lovely. So let's get to the Mexican Civil War. So I'm going to try my best Spanish pronunciation here. If I didn't do it right, I'm sorry. I grew up in Colorado. So in 1911, Francisco Madero, this guy right here, follow my little arrow, overthrew the dictator of Mexico. Mexico, since independence, had a long history of strong men or caudillos who kind of came to power, and there's a lot of turmoil that goes on, and this erupts into full-fledged civil war in the teens. In 1913, Madero, here with the sweet goatee, was kicked out and killed by this guy, Victoriano Huerta. Wilson refused to recognize the new government of Huerta, which he called a government of butchers. Now, he believed in moral diplomacy, that the United States should teach Latin America to elect good men instead of just military strong leaders. And so, civil war breaks out in Mexico, basically between Huerta and the people that supported Madero. And so this guy right down here is opposed to Huerta. And so Wilson was selling arms to the rival of Huerta, the leader of Mexico. His name is Venustiano Carranza. That's about as good as I can get with rolling my R's. My Spanish teacher might be proud. In 1914, you have the Tampico incident, where U.S. sailors were arrested in, kind of a probably not behaving well. And so the United States seized the port of Veracruz. They took our sailors, we took their city on the Gulf of Mexico to prevent German arms from reaching Huerta, is what they claimed. And so this isn't good. And so Huerta fled in August after Argentina, Brazil, and Chile arbitrated. And so there's still chaos and civil war, but the supposed government of butchers under Huerta, Huerta is disposed. Carranza is trying to take over. But then you have the rise of Francisco Pancho Villa, the folklore, the hero of mainly northern Mexico, but all of Mexico. Pancho Villa is a character in Mexican folklore, very similar to Robin Hood, who kind of stole from the rich and gave to the poor. That's not his real name. His real name is Dorotero Arango, but he adopts the moniker Pancho Villa, and he becomes a hero of Mexico. He launches an uprising against Carranza. And so you have this civil war going on. In 1916, he seized and shot 16 Americans, helping to provoke war between the U.S. and Mexico. And then to go one step further, he invaded New Mexico. He invaded the United States and killed 18 Americans on American soil, which Americans usually, they're pretty level-headed. They don't really run off to war too much until American blood is spilled. You have 16 Americans killed in Mexico, and then Pancho Villa and his forces invaded the United States and New Mexico and killed 18, and so the U.S. Army was dispatched under John J. Pershing to catch him, and they couldn't. The Mexican people hid him, they protected him, and he always slept through their fingers. In fact, a young Man in the army at that time was George S. Patton to try to catch up with the horses, tried to mount a machine gun on a Model T and chase them down, which kind of gave him the idea for tanks a little bit and tank commandment and how the cavalry could work that was mechanized. And so the people protected Pancho Villa. It was World War I raging in 1917, the United States slowly being pulled in. The U.S. kind of turns attention to Europe and ignores Mexico. And so Pancho Villa, in a way, gets away with this. He's later murdered by rival Mexican factions, I believe in the 20s. Briefly allied with Emiliano Zapata, which is a land reformer from Mexico. You have a picture here of U.S. Marines in Haiti in 1919, just kind of showing another one of these banana wars. This is basically everything that went on in the Caribbean from 1898 till 1941. You have the sinking of the Maine. You have the Spanish-American War. You have revolutions in all these years. U.S. troops in Cuba in all these years. You have the Platt Amendment. You have Haiti. You have the Dominican Republic. The U.S. take over Puerto Rico. The Puerto Ricans became U.S. citizens in 1917. We buy the Virgin Islands from Denmark. You have troops in Nicaragua. You have the Panama Canal being built. The United Fruit Company organized in Guatemala. Troops land there in Honduras to protect those. And then this whole mess in Mexico. It seizing the port of Veracruz. The U.S. Expeditionary Force going south into Mexico to try to capture Pancho Villa. When the Mexican Revolution started, the United States owned 43% of Mexican property. And so U.S. exports to Mexico was $1.3 billion. There was a lot of money invested there. There's Pancho Villa in northern Mexico, and this is Pancho Villa here sitting next to Emiliano Zapata. There's a revolutionary movement or a socialistic movement that's very controversial in Mexico today, named after him, called the Zapatistas. So let's switch gears to Europe. World War I, or as the Great War as they called it. It was when World War II came out that they went back and renamed World War I. It's kind of like Star Wars was released in 1917 as Star Wars. And then they released The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, and they went back and re-released the original Star Wars and called it Episode 4, A New Hope. And everyone went, why are we starting with 4? They're like, I don't care, that's lightsabers, it's awesome. So, causes of World War I. Just remember this acronym. MANIA. You probably heard that one before. I'm adding one. Plus WP. We'll get to that. And so there's an acronym that kind of fits this, and then we'll get to WP. So first off, you have nationalism. I don't go in order of MANIA. I don't know why. I probably should. That's probably not good teaching on my part. But this is the order I like to do. And so people are filled with nationalism. They love their country. They want their country to be the best. They want to prove they're the best. And then there's also this group of people that want their nation to have their own country. Maybe they are a nationality, they have a language, they have common religion, and they want their own nation as well, and they're being under the subjects of some empire. And so you have pride and loyalty in one's country or group. We have it in America whenever the Olympics happen, where it doesn't matter what state somebody's from or what sport is going on in the Olympics. If they have USA across their chest, it could be ping pong, it could be basketball, it could be gymnastics or swimming. We at home chant, USA, USA, USA. And it's the best chant ever in the world. Nobody can do it like us. I mean, Canada, it doesn't work. Sorry. So it's also a desire to have a best country, which everyone knows we're the best. If you're not from America, I'm sorry. Sorry for that. Also, desire to have your own country. Next, you have imperialism. This whole thing that we talked about in previous chapters, controlling other markets, controlling other people under your flag, and basically for a market to get goods and also to sell finished products and also for prestige. And so it's a competition for colonies. The biggest empire at that time was the British Empire. And so you have this competition through Europe to dominate the globe. You have militarism. This arms race that happened between these empires to maintain it. Who could have the biggest navy? Who could have the most battleships? What battleship had the most guns? And how big were the guns? And how much did the battleships weigh? Well, you got a gun. I got to get a gun. It's kind of the keeping up with the Joneses. And you have this very militaristic idealism or a militaristic competition going on in Europe. You have huge navies, huge armies, huge standing armies with wonderful technology. That's what they thought going on. In this picture here, we have the Kaiser Wilhelm II, which if you want me to translate it that from German, that's Caesar William #2. That's what Kaiser means in German. And then you have Winston Churchill, future prime minister there. He was kind of Secretary of Navy at that time, I think. And so also it's kind of weird is you have the 9 kings of Europe. This is kind of a family feud. These 9 kings are basically who goes to war. Their nations fight each other. They didn't think it would ever come to blows because they're all cousins. Weird. So you have alliances. You have these basically to maintain a balance of power. Since the defeat of Napoleon ultimately at Waterloo in 1815, there's been this obsession with Europe to have a balance of power. No nation can get too powerful because they didn't want anyone to dominate like Napoleon did. And so sometimes they would switch sides. But you have these alliances that occurred throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century. And when World War I kind of settles in and it finally starts, you have these two alliances. You have the Triple Alliance, which is Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Italy, which is a newly formed country. Italy and Germany are very recent countries. Italy formed in the 1870s, Germany in the 1880s as a full nation. And then you have the Triple Entente. From that, you probably can guess that France is involved, duh. You have Great Britain, France, and Russia. And so if you have these two alliances here, you can see them in 1914. And then once everything happens, everything stays the same except Italy decides to switch sides. And so the Central Powers, they recruit the Ottoman Turks instead. And so it maintains a balance of power. Russia's loss to Japan kind of shook things up a little bit. And then the last one, which we'll get to the last A, but the one I'm adding is WP. They're called poor war plans. When you mobilize millions of men, and technology wasn't great then. I mean, they do have cable, they have telegraphs and all that. You needed surefire plans on how to mobilize, how to get all these men with their guns, to get them on the trains, to get them to the front, what division's going where. And so they come up with these extensive war plans way ahead of time. In case of war with such country A, you opened up and you follow the plan. You can't change the plan because you could lose time and then lose territory and ultimately lose the war. And so you have Count Alfred von Schlieffen, who devises the Schlieffen plan for the Germans. And there's a little error there. Let me just fix that real quick. For the Germans, I'll keep talking. And so they worked extensively on this. So they gave themselves 6 weeks and 7/8 of the German forces to take out France. Actually, they had this down to the day. They had 42 days to take out France. 42 days. And it's down to the minute, it's down to the hour. They are so meticulous in Germany that they have everything planned out. What trains are going, what divisions are going where, how many horses are being taken with them. Because in the 1870s, Prussia invaded France, and it took them 6 weeks. They paraded down the streets of Paris, and they kind of humiliated them, so they said they could do that. What Germany wants to avoid is fighting a two-front war. They don't want to divide their forces. So their idea is if you have to fight Russia or France, which one are you going to take out? Which one's the tougher fight? And that would be Russia. So you take out the weaker one, France, really quickly, and then turn all your forces onto Russia. So the Schlieffen plan was for speed and to basically take out the weaker of the two enemies. I was inspired by Hannibal at Cannae in the ancient wars, the Punic Wars, the Second Punic War to be exact. And it escalates the war. And we'll get to the specifics of this. We'll get back to the war plans in here a little bit. And so you have basically full mobilization. Just sending a division or two or just part of your army doesn't happen because you have to follow the plan. So then the last day, the assassination of the Prince of Austria-Hungarian Empire, or the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, occurred on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo. There was a terrorist organization from Serbia named the Black Hand, and they threw a bomb in his car. He was there to tour the city. It exploded. It killed some guards, or wounded them, and so he was going back to his hotel. He decided, you know what, I want to go check on those men that were wounded, just go to the hospital. And so instead of getting out of the car and go to the hotel, he and his wife went to the hospital. But on the way, the driver took a wrong turn. It just so happened that Gavrilo Princip, one of the guys that was a part of this plot, a 19-year-old, just happened to catch him and decided to shoot them both and kill them. And so Austria is outraged. Their emperor, Franz Joseph, was super old. They didn't know how long he was going to last. And so this was the heir to their throne. It really kind of throws their empire into disarray. And so Austria gives Serbia this ultimatum. Basically, you got 1 month to give up all the Black Hand, for all of our demands, or we declare war on you. Serbia, who had been kind of trounced and bullied around in this time in the teens, asked Russia, the traditional protector of them, to basically, hey, you got our back. You didn't get our back in 1912 because you were too worried about losing to Japan. And so Russia's like, we got your back. Serbia refuses, and so Austria declares war on Serbia, July 28th. So now the traditional protector of Serbia, the Russians, mobilize their forces against the Austro-Hungarians. So they take out their war plans, and they go, all right, step one, war with Austria, mobilize against Germany. And they're like, wait, I thought we were... Oh, yeah. Don't question the war plans. I got it. So you have Austria versus Russia. And so the Germans being provoked because the Russians, have their full army mobilizing against their borders, decides to pull out their Schlieffen Plan. And they go like, all right, step one, in war with Russia, invade France. Wait, what? I thought we were fighting Russia, and don't question the plan. You better get going. We have 42 days. You got to invade France. And if you're going to invade France in 42 days, you need a shortcut. That shortcut's through Belgium and the Netherlands, which that makes the British mad. So they're going to invade France first and then take out Russia. They don't want to take on two fronts. They invade through Belgium. They have 42 days. By violating neutral Belgium, the British go, oh, no, you didn't. That's why we get our waffles, and we're going to declare war on you as well. And so now the British are joining. What? What's going on? Europeans are weird. Here's the tragic Archduke and his wife that were murdered. And so the Great War. Basically, you get the Central Powers. You can see here they're just kind of in the center part of Europe. You have Germany, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Italy, like I said, who later refuses to uphold their alliance, joins the Allies later on. So they replace them with the Ottoman Turks, and eventually Bulgaria as well. The Allies, which were the British, the French, Russia, Italy eventually, and Japan. It's kind of weird, Russia and Japan just fought 10 years before. Japan doesn't really contribute a ton, but they're mad about the peace treaty at the end, by the way. And then you also have the United States, just kind of like, oh, they're fighting again. We'll go back to selling stuff. Europe was pretty excited to go to war. They thought it would be a quick war. They thought that they have all these guns. It's a chance for glory. It's a chance to prove our country's the best. To use all these guns we've been building, and we can expand our empire. This is going to be awesome. It had been a century since a major war had actually happened in Europe, so they weren't really sure what was going to happen. When you have extreme patriotism, by the way, extreme nationalism extreme, like a Mountain Dew product, it's called jingoism. Because the British would say, I don't agree with it. Well, but by jingo, if we have to, we're going to do it. We'll go invade South India, Pakistan, Hong Kong, Sudan, you name it. So there's no major war since 1815. This was a chance for glory. Here's the Allies onward to victory. You have the British, the Russians, the Japanese, the Montenegro, France, Belgium, and Serbia. Yay. There you go. Everything in orange are the bad guys, the United States. Everything in green is the good guys. And the neutral nations here, they don't get involved. Switzerland's pretty amazing. If you look at this map here, 2 wars, 2 world wars, neutral on both, which, if your army's best known for utility knife, probably shouldn't take on Nazis. Just good rule of thumb. So Wilson, when this all happens, he issues a Neutrality Proclamation. We are not getting involved. You guys are going cuckoo. I don't know why you're fighting. Who's this guy that got shot? Why are you guys fighting each other? Why is Germany, whatever. Why is Germany doing all the things that Germany's doing? Most Americans at the start of the war were anti-German, though. They saw the tail of the tape. You saw all these empires, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, the Ottomans, and Bulgaria. Those were imperialistic nations, whereas, yes, the British and the French had empires, but at least they were democratic like the United States at their home country. There's also 11 million immigrants who lived in the United States that had blood ties to the Central Powers. I mean, very recent immigrants that just came to the United States, they still had family fighting or living in Italy, living in Germany. So this made it a tough decision for a lot of Americans. Many Americans viewed Kaiser Wilhelm II, the leader of Germany, as the embodiment of the arrogant autocracy. The majority of Americans were opposed to war. We're not going to do this. Here's a political cartoon, Wake Up America, or a poster. Civilization calls for every man and child. We need you. This is the foreign influence. These are foreign-born people from the foreign powers, the Allied powers. You have all these total-born foreign born people. Then you have natives of 2 foreign-born parents or 1, and you can see that there's a lot of people that have connections to this war in Europe. So the American industry prospers off trade. You guys are going to war. You need to buy stuff. You need guns. You need food. You need anything. Uniforms, boots. We got it. We'll sell it to you. The Central Powers didn't like that we were trading with the Allies, but we're making money because that's what America really likes. The British, as part of their war, blockaded the Germans using their superior navy. The German navy was kind of held at bay for the entire war. And so the Germans, desperate to do something, turned to their Unterseeboot, which is German for U-boat or submarine, to basically wreak havoc on shipping lanes to Britain. J.P. Morgan, the big banker, lent $2.3 billion himself to the Allies. Who has that kind of money? That's crazy. And then in 1915, in February, the Germans announced that they're going to do unrestricted submarine warfare, desperate to win the war. And we'll talk in the next chapter about the specifics of why the war becomes a stalemate. They decided to attack any ship coming into a British port. It was basically submarines were stealthy. They didn't know where they were going to be, and they were going to sink these ships entering the ports. And so on May 7th, 1915, the Germans sunk the Lusitania, a passenger ship. There's over 1,000 killed, including 128 Americans, which I said earlier in the chapter, in this video. Americans pretty level-headed and cool until American blood is spilled. Later on, they sink the Sussex, and the war was in such a balance of such a kind of a stalemate that any amount of advantage, any influx of fresh new troops could have really won the war for the Allies. And so the Americans coming to the war really scared the Germans. So they issued the Sussex Pledge, which basically said, we're going to warn your ships before we sink them. I'm not sure how you do that from a submarine. You're underwater and you just yell, hey, we're going to shoot at you. I guess, I don't know. By the way, the Lusitania was actually found to be smuggling guns and ammunition in the hull of the ship. So, oops. They would warn ships before attacking. Here's the Lusitania, and if you think that ship looks familiar. It was made by the same company the Titanic was. That's bad track record for that company. Here's the exports of the belligerents. We were selling lots of stuff to the British, to the French, and then we were selling stuff to the Germans too. But the British blockade took its toll. This is all before the United States actually joined the war. You can see Italy joined in 1915. This is the British military area, the blockade, and this is the German submarine zone. Any ship coming into these ports was subject to attack by the U-boats. There's where the Lusitania was torpedoed. This is an advertisement in the New York Herald on May 1st, 1915. Just days before the Lusitania, right here, and then you have the typical cartoon in reaction to that. So Roosevelt refused to run for president again because he didn't want to split his party. He didn't want to hurt them, and so Roosevelt's not going to do anything. He actually dies in the next 4 years anyway. The Republicans chose Supreme Court Justice Charles Evans Hughes. That's kind of a weird pick. The Republican platform condemned the Democratic tariff, the assaults on the trust, and then how Wilson dealt with Mexico and Germany. The Democrats chose Wilson and ran on an anti-war campaign. In fact, his motto was, he kept us out of war. Pretty good motto. Woodrow Wilson won the election in 1916, pretty close election, and then immediately goes to war. He's inaugurated president, and I think just about a month later, we declare war on Germany. Good job. Helped holding those campaign promises. He kept us out of war. He won. We're going to war. Oops. He won only by 600,000 votes and 23 electoral votes. Very, very close election. Here's the electoral map. You can see the Hughes did very well across the country. Wilson won a lot of the traditional Republican states out west once again. Pretty close election, though. That's it. We're going to find out more about World War I and how the United States gets pulled into it in the next chapter. Hope you enjoyed this.